was 34 years old the night everything in my life tipped over. Though I did not know it yet when I turned onto Willow Glen Drive in Stockton, with the heater blowing against my hands. The houses on that block were wrapped in lights and plastic Santas, inflatable snowmen, even though the air was too warm for real winter. I slowed the car as I got closer to my dad's place, and I could feel that old pull in my chest, the one that always showed up whenever I drove back to the house where I grew up. A mix of dread and hope. Even after all these years, even after I promised myself I would never expect anything from him again. What are you doing while listening to this story? For me, I was sitting behind the wheel of my old silver sedan on that Christmas night, trying to steady my breathing and convince myself that this year might be different. I parked near the curb and watched the porch light flicker. For a moment, I just sat there with the engine running, staring at the windows glowing gold from the dining room chandelier. I had not been inside that house for almost 2 years. The last time ended with my dad telling me I embarrassed him by showing up, looking like I had just come from a thrift store. I told myself I had grown stronger since then, but the truth was, I was terrified he would say something that would cut deep again, and that I would let it hurt me. I turned off the engine and stepped outside, smoothing the skirt of the simple dark green dress I found on sale at a consignment shop. The fabric was soft enough and clean enough, and I thought it looked elegant in a quiet way. But the moment I walked toward the porch, I already felt the old shame rising. I could picture my dad's eyes scanning every thread, hunting for imperfections. I hated that I still cared. The porch boards creaked under my boots. I lifted my hand to knock, hesitated, then knocked anyway before I could talk myself into leaving. The door opened faster than I expected. My dad stood there, taller than I remembered, in a dark sweater that probably cost more than my entire monthly budget. His expression shifted the second he saw me. Not surprising, not warmth. Something closer to disappointment, mixed with judgment. He looked me up and down slowly. "Veronica," he said in a flat voice, "you did not dress up for Christmas dinner." I tried to smile, but it felt thin. "This is dressed up for me." He stepped aside without answering. The house smelled like roasted ham and cinnamon and something buttery. It should have been comforting, but instead, it felt like a trap. As I walked in, I heard the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Linda, my dad's wife, glanced over her shoulder. She wore a bright red dress and her hair was sprayed into perfect curls. She pretended to look pleased to see me, but the tightness around her mouth gave her away. "Well, look at you," she said, while wiping her hands on a towel. "You really made it." She said it was like arriving at my father's home for Christmas was a burdensome favor I barely deserved to offer. Then Emily appeared, her daughter from a previous relationship, 26, and always perfectly styled for her endless attempts to grow an online following. She gave me a once-over and laughed softly. "Here she is," she said. "The poor side of the family has arrived." I felt the words land in my stomach like a small stone dropping through water. I forced myself to keep moving, to hang my coat on the same hook I used when I was a teenager. My hands were shaking slightly, but I pressed them against my skirt and kept my chin up. I would not let them see me shrink. The dining room table was already set, 6 plates arranged neatly, crystal glasses catching the light. My place was not at the table, but at the end, a lonely chair squeezed near a side cabinet. No one said anything about it. They did not have to. The message was clear enough. Dad poured wine for everyone except me, then filled my glass with tap water like I was a child. When he sat down, he leaned back in his chair and took a slow sip as if preparing a speech. For a moment, I let myself hope he might say something kind, something fatherly. Instead, he stared at my dress again. "You know," he said, "I thought by your age you might have figured life out. A little more." I swallowed. "I have a job. I pay my rent. I am doing fine." He shook his head. "Doing fine is what people say when they are broke." Emily giggled, and Linda pressed her lips together to hide a smile. No one defended me. No one ever did. Dinner felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. They talked about vacations they took without inviting me, restaurants I had never heard of, clothes that cost more than my weekly paycheck. Every now and then, someone would glance my way, almost gleeful at how little I had to add. At one point, my dad lifted the serving tray and passed the roasted ham around the table. When the dish reached me, he did not even look. He said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear that it was too nice at meal for someone who did not contribute. Maybe Veronica can help herself to leftovers later, he said. She is used to that. The laughter around the table was soft but cruel, the kind of sound that pretends to be lighthearted but cuts deeper than a shout. My face felt hot. My chest squeezed tight. I could not tell if the humiliation or the anger was stronger. All I knew was that I needed air. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and said I needed to grab something from my car. They barely reacted. To them, I was already invisible. I walked toward the front door, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I was not sure if I wanted to leave or just breathe. My hand touched the doorknob, but before I opened it, Linda's voice drifted from behind me. Veronica waited a second. We need to talk about some paperwork. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself before turning around. She held a small stack of forms in her hand, each sheet crisp and white. Her smile was sweet, almost gentle, but her eyes were too bright. Just a few things of your mom's, she said. You should sign them tonight. It will help the family. The word mom hit me in a tender place I kept hidden. It had been 2 years since she passed, and hearing Linda say the word felt wrong in a way I could not quite name. What is this? I asked. Linda stepped closer, lowering her voice. Nothing complicated. Some old insurance papers your mom left behind. Your dad needs you to sign so we can handle everything properly. Insurance. My heart tightened. My mom never mentioned anything about insurance. She barely had enough to pay bills most months. Something about the way Linda held the papers made my skin prickle. Before I could ask anything else, my dad's voice boomed from the table. Linda brings her back. She needs to sign. We do not have all night. I looked toward the dining room and saw all 3 of them staring at me. My dad, Emily, looked curious, maybe even amused, waiting to see how small I would make myself this time. I felt the door behind me. I could almost taste freedom in the cold night air outside. But again, the one who never quite fit, never quite pleased, never quite earned her place. I took a slow breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands, then looked at the papers Linda was pressing toward me. That was the moment everything cracked, though none of us understood it yet. And before the night was over, the entire house would be staring out the windows in shock as 5 black SUVs changed my life forever. I stood there in the entryway, caught between the person I had been for decades and the person I was about to become, waiting for the next blow without knowing. The next knock on the door would not be aimed at me at all. It would be an invitation. Linda held the stack of papers out like it was something harmless, just another holiday chore. Sign this, and then we can get back to the ham and the fake smiles. Up close, I could see the company logo in the top corner, Great Harbor Life, printed in blue. The kind of logo you only ever notice on boring mail you do not want to open. My stomach tightened. Insurance, I said slowly. What kind of insurance? Linda shifted her weight, still smiling. Just some old life insurance your mom had, honey. Your dad has been trying to take care of it, but they need your signature. These companies make everything so complicated. Her voice stayed soft, but her fingers pressed the papers into my hands like she was afraid I might drop them and remember they were mine. I looked down at the first page. There were lines about beneficiary and assignment of rights and something called release of claim. The words blurred together. I had filled out enough forms over the years to know 2 things. First, nothing involving insurance was ever simple. Second, anything this vague was probably not in my favor. My mom never told me she had a policy. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Thin but steady. She could barely afford rent. When would she have paid for life insurance? Linda laughed lightly. Everyone has some little policy somewhere, maybe through a job from a long time ago. These companies keep stuff forever. They sent notices here. Your dad just does not want anything to get messy with the estate. My heart stuttered at that word. Estate. As if my mom had left behind more than a small box of jewelry and a worn Bible I kept on my nightstand. Did they call me? I asked. Or mail anything to me? Linda paused for a beat too long. Well, the mail came here. This is still the address on file. She flicked her eyes toward the dining room where my dad was sitting, listening to something on the television while pretending not to eavesdrop. He did not change the address because he did not want to make trouble for you. That is why it is better if he just handles it. I flipped to the second page. There was a line with my name typed neatly, Veronica Caroline Hale, and a blank space for my signature beneath language that said I was assigning all rights and interests to Michael Porter. My fingertips went cold. So, if I sign this, I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, what exactly happens? Linda gave me that patient look she always used when she thought I was being difficult. The company sends whatever tiny amount your mom had to your dad, and he uses it to keep the mortgage paid and the lights on. For this house. For the family. She emphasized those last 3 words like they were supposed to shame me into agreement. How much is it? I said. She blinked. I am not sure. A few tens of thousands, maybe. These old policies are never that big. She said it too quickly, like she practiced the line and it still came out crooked. You do not know, or you are not telling me, I asked. Her smile thin. Veronica, why are you making this hard? Your dad has carried this family on his back for years. He is under a lot of pressure. This is one thing you can do to help. Your mom would want that. The mention of my mom felt like someone pressing on a bruise. I thought of her hands, red from hot dishwater, rubbing lotion into her knuckles at night. I thought of how she used to fold coupons at the kitchen table while my dad complained about how tired he was from his long day. She never once mentioned having any secret cushion, any safety net. If she had one, why would she not tell me? In the dining room, my dad coughed loudly. Linda raised her voice just enough. She is just a little confused, Michael. She will sign. She looked back at me. Right. I handed the papers back. I am not signing anything tonight. I need to read it. Maybe talk to someone who understands this. Her eyes hardened for a moment before she pasted the smile back on. Talk to someone. Like who? An attorney. Do you have attorney money, Veronica? Dad's chair scraped across the floor then. He appeared in the doorway, jaw clenched. What is going on? Linda held the pages against her chest. She is stalling, she said. She wants to drag this out. Michael, we do not have time for this. The company has deadlines. Dad looked at me. Really looked, and I saw the anger sitting under his skin like a live wire. He held out his hand. Give me the forms. I kept my hands by my sides. I need more information, I said quietly. I did not even know Mom had a policy. Nobody told me. His face reddened. You think we are trying to cheat you? Is that it? You think I am stealing from my own daughter? I did not answer. I did not trust my voice. He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell the wine on his breath. Caroline left a mess, he said, spitting my mom's name like it tasted bad. She left bills and headaches and a house that is almost underwater. I am trying to clean it up. The least you can do is not make it harder. I bit the inside of my cheek, feeling the anger trying to push past the fear. If the money is so small, I said, why do you need it so badly? His eyes flashed. Because I am the one holding everything together. And if this house goes, you think you will have a place to come back to. You owe this family that much. Sign the damn papers. The word owe slammed into me. For a second, I almost reached for the pen, just to make the whole scene stop. Just to make him step back, lower his voice. That old reflex to appease him rose up like muscle memory. But under it, something else stirred. A file of memories I had tried to ignore, my mom's tired eyes. She told me years ago in a hushed voice that some alone, and that if anyone ever, I will read it later. If it really is what you say it is, there is no rush. The vein in his forehead pulsed. Around us, the house felt too quiet. I could hear the television in the other room, some canned laughter from a sitcom, wildly out of place. Finally, he lowered his hand and let out a harsh breath. Fine, he said, have your little moment. But do not expect me to sit here while you act like a victim. You show up once in a blue moon with your thrift store clothes and your sad little job, and then you get suspicious when I ask for help. It is pathetic, Veronica. He turned and stalked back toward the dining room. Linda lingered a second longer, her mouth a tight line. "You are making a mistake," she murmured. Then she followed him, clutching the papers, heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. I stood alone in the entryway, every nerve buzzing. My hands had started to shake again. Part of me wanted to run out the door, drive away and never come back. Another part of me knew that if I left right then, I would be the one they live. Talked about for years as the unstable one who ruined Christmas. So I took a breath, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the dining room. The conversation picked up in a forced way, everyone pretending nothing had happened. The tension sat over the table like another place setting. My dad avoided looking at me. Linda poured herself more wine. Emily stayed glued to her phone, thumbs tapping rapidly. I sat down at the end of the table again and picked at the edge of my napkin. I could feel Linda's frustration vibrating from across the room, and I could feel my dad's anger simmering under the surface. I tried to focus on my plate, but every bite tasted like cardboard. At some point, I realized the room felt quieter, the usual TV noise gone. When I looked up, my dad was scrolling through his own phone, his brow furrowed. Linda leaned toward him, whispering something. Emily bit her lip to hide a smile. I tried to ignore it, until I noticed the way Emily was holding her phone up, not flat on the table, but angled, the camera facing me. Her expression had shifted into that polished mask I had seen in the few videos of hers that went semi-viral, bright, fake sympathy, over a core of judgment. I heard her voice then, too sweet. "So, guys, look at this. My half-sister, Veronica Hale, not our family name, came to Christmas dinner looking like she just got off a double shift at the Bucks dollar store. And now she is throwing a tantrum over a little money she never even knew existed. The poor side of the family is acting up." A soft ping followed, then another, as comments started to roll in on her screen. I could not see the words yet, but I saw the hearts and laughing faces scrolling. My face burned hot. Emily glanced up at me, her eyes flicking between my flushed cheeks and the phone. She knew I had figured it out, that I understood she was broadcasting my humiliation in real time. My dad did not tell her to stop. Linda did not tell her to put the phone away. No one in that room chose me. I sat very still, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the clink of a fork against a plate, the soft buzz of Emily's notifications. Somewhere outside, a car engine passed by, but it was distant. Unimportant, just another noise in a night that already felt too loud. I had no idea yet that a different set of engines would be pulling up to the curb soon, and that for once the eyes of the room would not be on my shame, but on their own. Emily held her phone up like a little mirror, angled so she could catch my face whenever she wanted. She did not try to hide what she was doing. She wanted me to see it, to know she had an audience somewhere out there watching me try to keep myself together. I caught phrases drifting from her direction, bits and pieces she said under her breath. Poor side of the family. She thinks she is too good. My sister is being dramatic again. I sat still with my hands folded in my lap. I did not trust myself to move, because if I moved, I might say something. And if I said something, I might cry. And crying, in this house, would be blood in the water. My dad looked up from his plate. Emily cut it out, but there was amusement in his eyes. He did not actually want her to stop. Linda topped off her own wine, and then my dad's. Neither of them looked at me. They talked about a neighbor's new truck, about the price of groceries, about anything that made them feel superior. I kept my eyes on my plate and tried to chew around the knot in my throat. Then my dad turned toward me. "So, Veronica, you are still working at that little clinic, the one where you argue with insurance people all day?" "It is a medical office," I said softly. "I handle scheduling, insurance forms. I like it fine." He scoffed. "That is not a career. That is something you do when you do not have any ambition." Emily laughed. Linda smiled into her glass. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I pay my rent. I take care of myself." My dad leaned back, studying me like I was a disappointing report card. "And you think that is enough? At your age?" Something inside me flickered, small but hot. I wanted to ask him when anything I ever did had been enough. But before I could speak, he lifted his glass in a half-hearted toast. "To people who actually contribute, To the family members who carry real weight, not the ones who show up once in a blue moon. His eyes landed on me as he said it. It felt like a slap. Linda raised her own glass, smiling. To the ones who stay. Emily chimed in. And to the ones who will do the right thing. Right, Veronica. My stomach twisted. I reached for my water to hide the way my hands shook. I pushed my chair back. I need some air. My dad rolled his eyes. Of course you do, drama queen. I heard Emily's phone ping with new comments as I walked toward the entryway. I felt every ping like a little pinprick in my spine. When I reached the front door, I gripped the knob, pressing my forehead gently against the cool wood. I wanted to walk out. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave that house behind forever. But I stood frozen there, listening to their voices drifting from the dining room, pretending to care about dessert, pretending they were not pushing me toward a breaking point. Behind me, Linda's shoes clicked softly on the floor. She touched my shoulder lightly. Do not make a scene, honey. Your dad is under a lot of pressure. Just sign the papers so we can all move on. I turned around slowly. Why do you need me to sign something I have not even read? Linda's expression tightened before she smoothed it over. Because it is the right thing to do. Your dad needs it. And your mom would want him to handle her affairs. My mom had never asked him to handle anything. I knew that in my bones. If it is so small, I said, why not let me keep it? She left it in my name. Linda's smile cracked. This is not about you. It is about this family. There it was. The guilt. The pressure. The twist of the screw. Before I could respond, my dad's voice rang out. Linda, bring her back. We are not begging. I walked back to the dining room. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of standing alone in hallways. I sat in the same lonely seat at the end of the table. Emily lifted her phone instantly, pretending she just happened to be recording the holiday cheer. You are ready to sign yet, she asked. Her voice was sugar-coated poison. I ignored her, but I could feel my face heating again. I could feel the humiliation tightening around me like a too small coat. My dad stabbed a piece of ham. Here's what I do not get, Veronica. You do nothing for this house. You do nothing for this family. On the one time we need you to do something simple, you throw a fit. I did not raise my voice. I did not lift my head. I just said, very quietly, I am not signing something I have not read. He slammed his fork onto the table. You owe me. I fed you. I kept a roof over your head. I gave you a life. You think your mom did that? She could barely keep the lights on. His words hit harder than I wanted them to. I felt that old bruise under my ribs, the one that always formed whenever he talked about my mom like she was a burden instead of the only steady thing in my life. Emily muttered into her phone. She is doing it again, the victim thing. I stared at the tablecloth, my throat burning. Then I noticed it. A brief flash of white light sweeping over the dining room window. Then another. Then a third. Moving slow. Controlled. Too bright to be a single car turning around. My dad stopped mid-sentence. What the hell? Emily lowered her phone. Are we expecting anyone? No, Linda said under her breath. Nobody comes this late. The lights passed over the window again, brighter this time, like several headlights lined up perfectly in the driveway. Then came the sound. Low, steady, a layered growl of engines idling outside the house in unison. Not one car, not two, more. The kind of sound you feel in your ribs before you fully register it. My dad's face was drained of color. He stood up quickly, wiping his hands on his napkin. Who is at my house at this hour? Emily moved to the window and peeked between the blinds. Her hand flew to her mouth. Dad, you need to see this. Linda stood, still holding her wine glass. Her eyes darted toward the front door like she expected someone to kick it in. I rose slowly from my seat, my heartbeat thumping in my ears. Through the blinds, I could see shapes now. 5 large, black vehicles parked in a clean, diagonal line across the driveway and curb. Sleek, polished, identical. No Christmas visitor had ever arrived like that on Willow Glen Drive. The engines fell silent, one by one, until the whole street seemed to hold its breath. Then the first door opened, Emily whispered without turning away from the window. Oh my God, they are wearing suits. All of them. My dad stepped closer, his voice cracked. "Who are those people? Did somebody call the bank?" For the first time all night, no one was looking at me with disgust or mockery. They were looking toward the front of the house with fear. A second car door opened, then a third. Linda set her wine glass down with a trembling hand. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like I was standing at the edge of something enormous, and had no idea whether it would swallow me or save me. Then came the sound of footsteps on the porch, heavy, measured, confidence, and a firm knock at the door, not frantic, not hesitant. A knock from someone who already knew exactly who they had come for. I drew a slow breath as every head in the room turned toward me, and I had no idea yet that the next few seconds would rip my entire life open. The knock came again, slow and steady, like the person behind it was sure I would open the door eventually. No one at the table moved. My dad stared at the hallway as if he could make the sound disappear by sheer force of will. I stood up before I realized what I was doing. "I will get it." My dad snapped from his chair. "Do not open that door." His voice cracked, thin and tight. Nothing like authority. But my feet were already moving down the hallway. Through the frosted glass, I saw dark figures waiting on the porch. Suits. Several of them. The kind of silhouettes you did not ignore. I opened the door. 5 black SUVs filled the driveway. Each one identical, parked in a neat formation that made the whole street look like it had been staged. The porch was lined with 6 men in dark suits, all standing with a calm confidence that made the air feel colder. The man in front stepped slightly closer. His hair was silver and perfectly combed, his expression steady. He inclined his head. "Miss Veronica Hale." Behind me, I heard the sharp intake of breath. My dad stiffened from somewhere near the dining room doorway. He hated hearing my last name spoken like that, the name that was not his, and never had been. I swallowed. Yes, my dad's footsteps pounded closer. "Who is out there?" The man did not look at him. "I am Jonathan Reeves. I represent the Hale Foundation Board of Trustees. The board is waiting for Miss Hale." My dad pushed past me and planted himself in the doorway. "She is not going anywhere with you people." "What kind of stunt is this?" Jonathan finally looked at him. "This visit concerns documents addressed to Miss Hale and mail delivered to the residence belonging to Michael Porter." My dad's jaw tightened. His name falling from a stranger's mouth made him straighten like someone had just pulled his strings. Jonathan continued in that same even tone. "Several certified envelopes from Great Harbor Life were accepted at your address. They were addressed to Miss Hale. They contained claim information regarding a life insurance policy maintained by her mother, Caroline Hale. Records show they were opened and never forwarded." The dining room behind us fell completely silent. My hands went cold. I asked quietly why the foundation would care about a simple policy. Jonathan said that was something best explained privately. The board had been attempting to reach me for weeks. When mail to the Porter residence went unanswered, they reviewed the situation and decided a personal visit was necessary. My stepmom appeared behind my dad, pale but trying to smile. "This is a mistake. We are handling things. It is Christmas. This is not appropriate." Jonathan turned his calm eyes toward her. "The only mistake was intercepting and withholding Miss Hale's correspondence. That is a federal matter." My dad's voice rose. "Now listen, this is my house. We are in the middle of something. You cannot take her away." Jonathan did not raise his own voice. "She is an adult. She chooses where she goes." Those words hung in the hallway. My dad hated them. Jonathan looked back at me. "Miss Hale, the board is assembled tonight in Sacramento. They can explain the situation fully. You may bring your phone. You may return home at any time. No one will ask you to sign anything tonight." My dad grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my sleeve. "You are not going with them. You stay here. Do you hear me?" I pulled my arm free. The motion felt small, but it shook the entire room. I said, "I am going." My dad's face turned a bright, furious red. "Veronica, do not be stupid. You do not know these people." I looked at the line of SUVs. the men in suits waiting with quiet certainty. I looked at my dad, who had opened my mail and tried to take the last thing my mom left for me. He was right. I did not know these people. But I knew him. I slipped on my coat from the hook. I kept my eyes straight ahead. Jonathan stepped aside just enough to give me space. The porch light hit the polished cars in a long row of reflections. My dad shouted something behind me. Linda whispered my name like I was betraying her. Emily put her hand over her mouth, phone hovering as if she did not know what to record anymore. I walked past them all. The cold air felt sharp against my face. The porch steps creaked under my boots. One of the drivers opened the door of the lead SUV. The interior glowed with a soft light, warm and impossibly calm after the storm I had just walked through. I turned once, just enough to see my dad standing in the doorway, his hands clenched, his face twisted with something between anger and fear. He looked smaller than he ever had. Then I stepped inside the SUV. The door closed with a quiet click that felt like the cleanest break of my life. I settled into the seat, my hands still trembling slightly. Jonathan climbed in beside me. The other men returned to their vehicles. The engine started in perfect synchronization, low and steady. As the convoy pulled away from the curb, I watched the house shrink in the side mirror until it was just a dull patch of yellow light behind us. I did not know what waited for me in Sacramento. But I knew one thing. I was no longer walking back into that house. The SUV pulled onto the main road, the neighborhood falling away behind us like it had never been mine to begin with. I sat in the back seat across from Jonathan, trying to slow my breathing. The interior was spotless, quiet, almost too calm after everything that had just exploded in my dad's house. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. I watched Christmas lights blur past my window. Whole rows of houses decorated in cheerful colors that felt a world away from what I had stepped into. When I finally found my voice, it sounded small. I asked him why the foundation cared about a simple life insurance policy. Why 5 black SUVs were needed. Why did this feel like the opening scene of someone else's life? Jonathan folded his hands calmly. He said the policy was legitimate and had been maintained for many years. It named only one beneficiary, Veronica Caroline Hale. Me. Not Michael Porter, not Linda, not anyone else. The carrier mailed the claim packet to the Porter residence because that was the only address on file for me. And every envelope had been accepted and opened. My chest tightened. I asked how they knew. He said the insurance company kept records of every certified delivery, every signature, every call. They flagged the situation when a man identifying himself as Michael Porter asked how to redirect the benefit. When told he could not without my signature, he never contacted them again. But the mail kept being accepted at that address. I felt something cold spread through me. All those months when I wondered why no mail ever came with her name on it. All those days my dad snapped at me for being ungrateful or irresponsible. Now I could see the shape of it, but I still did not understand why a foundation would care. Jonathan watched the road for a moment before answering. He said it started with my last name, Hale. It triggered a flag in their system that connected the insurance inquiry to the Hale Foundation in Sacramento. He said the foundation kept a limited internal family record because the original donor, Charles Everett Hale, wanted any living descendants to be notified of certain matters, not obligations, not expectations, just information. I asked him how my mom fit into this. Jonathan opened a slim folder beside him. He said my mom, born Caroline Hale, left her family in her 20s. She never took their money. She signed no claims of inheritance. She walked away clean. But when she gave birth to me, she filled out the birth certificate alone. She listed my last name as Hale. At the time, Michael Porter was not legally recorded. No second signature, no change later. That meant the Hale name stayed on every official document tied to me. I stared at the passing lights, letting that settle. The name I had carried my whole life, the name my dad resented every time he heard it, had been my mom's quiet decision, a decision that was now pulling me somewhere she never got to return to. Jonathan continued. He said the foundation usually stayed hands-off, but when they saw months of unreturned mail, all accepted at the Porter residence, and when the insurance carrier reported a possible redirection attempt, they decided I might not even know I had rights. That was why they acted. Not to take me away, but to make sure I could choose for myself. We left the city limits. The road stretched long and mostly empty. At one point, my voice shook when I asked him if the policy was large. He said it was modest, not life-changing, but enough that my mom clearly wanted me to have something of hers, enough to matter. But the policy was only the beginning. There were other documents the board wanted to discuss with me, matters my mom never got to finish. I felt the SUV slow as we approached Sacramento. The skyline rose ahead of us. Clean glass buildings mixed with old brick. At that hour, the streets were quiet, but pockets of warm light still glowed from windows high above. We pulled into a private lot beside a mid-rise building. The brass plaque near the entrance reflected the headlights. Hale Foundation. The name looked strange and familiar at the same time. All 5 SUVs parked in a smooth line. Drivers stepped out. Jonathan waited for the door to open before he spoke again. He said I did not have to decide anything tonight. He said I was free to listen, ask questions, and leave whenever I wanted. No signatures, no pressure. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and felt the cool Sacramento air wrap around me. It smelled faintly of rain and distant traffic. The building was simple, understated, nothing flashy. Just tall windows and warm light inside. A far cry from the loud, tense dining room I had escaped. Jonathan walked beside me as we moved toward the entrance. The glass door clicked softly when the driver held it open. I paused for a second, staring at the small plaque again, at the name I had carried my whole life without understanding what it meant. The Porter house felt 1,000 miles behind me. I took a breath and stepped inside. I had no idea what waited upstairs, but whatever it was, it belonged to me in a way nothing in my dad's house ever had. I stepped inside the building and the warmth hit my face, a soft mix of clean air and something faint like cedar. The lobby was quiet, with tall windows and a single security desk where a woman in a navy blazer stood, as if she had been expecting us. Jonathan gave her a small nod, and she pressed a button that opened elevators behind her. No questions. No sign-ins, just a silent acknowledgement that I belonged here tonight. We stepped into the elevator and the doors closed with a gentle slide. The ride was smooth and quick, barely noticeable except for the slight shift in pressure as we climbed. I watched the floor numbers rise and felt the weight of every second. Behind my ribs, something fluttered, part nerves, part disbelief. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway ahead was lined with framed photographs. Some showed college scholarships. Some showed old medical clinics with fresh paint. Some showed a man I recognized from a picture my mom once kept tucked in the back of her Bible. Her grandfather, Charles Everett Hale. I stopped for a moment. My fingers brushed the frame lightly. Jonathan stood a few steps behind me, waiting without pushing. I whispered that I had seen that face before. He said Caroline carried only a few things with her when she left, and that photo was one of them. The hallway opened into a conference room lit by warm, recessed lights. The walls were paneled in wood, the kind you only saw in older buildings that had been carefully cared for. A long table sat in the center, and around it were men and women who looked like they had paused real conversations just to look at me. A woman with silver hair tied back neatly in a low bun stood first. Her name was Margaret Hale, the current chair. She walked toward me with a steadiness that reminded me of my mom when she wanted me to know she saw me. Really saw me. She reached out her hand. "Veronica, we are very glad you came." I shook her hand before realizing my palm was damp. She did not seem to mind. Her eyes softened as she studied me for a long second, and then she motioned toward the table. Jonathan guided me to a seat near the corner so I would not feel boxed in. A few more trustees introduced themselves, each polite, each reserved, none with the tight smiles my dad and Linda wore when they wanted something from me. Margaret sat across from me and opened a folder already placed at her seat. She said they wanted to discuss several matters tonight, but they would begin with the one that prompted the immediate visit. She slid a sheet toward me. I glanced down and saw a copy of my birth certificate. My name, my mom's name, and a blank space where father should have been. I felt my breath catch. When I looked up, Margaret continued speaking gently. Caroline completed this document alone. That is why your legal name on all state and federal records remains Hale. Michael Porter was not listed, and unless legally amended later with his signature and yours, your name could not be changed. I stared at the single, empty space on the page. I had never seen it. I had never even thought to ask. My mom always said my name came from her side of the family because it sounded prettier. I never knew the truth behind it. Margaret said quietly that this was not unusual. Many young mothers filled out the paperwork alone. Some relationships were uncertain. Some fathers were not present. Some mothers wanted their children to carry their own lineage. I whispered that my mom must have felt very alone. Margaret nodded. She said that loneliness was something the foundation had seen before, especially in families with old expectations and old wounds. Jonathan placed another document in front of me. This time it was a letter from Great Harbor Life. The heading was stamped with a date from the previous year. Addressed to me. Delivered to the Porter residence. Signed for by Michael Porter. I counted the pages. 3 letters. 3 signatures. All his. My stomach twisted. My fingers curled under the edge of the table. I asked why he had opened them, why he had not told me. Why did he wait until tonight to shove his own paperwork at me? Margaret answered. Because the policy named you alone, and because Mr. Porter was facing financial strain that made the temptation to redirect funds unusually strong. There was no accusation in her voice, just plain truth delivered without malice. I asked how much the policy was for. Jonathan gave the numbers softly. A little over $78,000, not millions. Not enough to change a life, but enough to steady one. Enough that my mom would have wanted it to reach me. Enough that my dad would have tried to take it. The room went still for a moment as I absorbed it. I felt something hot rise behind my eyes, but I pushed it back. I was not crying here. Not in front of these people, not tonight. Then Margaret said there was something else, something they had been instructed to hold until after my mom's passing. She placed a small sealed envelope on the table. The edges were worn. The handwriting across the front was unmistakable. My mom's. For the first time since leaving the Porter house, I felt my whole body go still. Every muscle, every thought, every breath. I picked up the envelope slowly. My name was written in the same looping script she used on birthday cards and notes. I traced the curve of the V with my thumb. My voice barely formed the words. When did she write this? Margaret said they did not know the exact year, only that the envelope had been in the Foundation's archives for more than 15 years. It was part of a file she prepared long before she married Michael Porter, long before she left Sacramento, long before she decided to raise me far from this place. I swallowed hard and asked why she left it here. Margaret, if anything ever happened to her, her daughter would not be forgotten by her family. I slipped a finger under the seal and felt the paper tremble. The room around me blurred slightly as I pulled the letter out. The handwriting wavered on the page. Familiar loops and slanted curves that made my chest ache. I read the first line silently. My hands shook too much to continue reading aloud. Jonathan shifted in his chair, as if giving me a small pocket of privacy in the middle of so many watching eyes. Margaret lowered her gaze respectfully. The letter was short. Not more than half a page, but it felt like stepping into a room my mom had built years ago, waiting for me. When I finished reading, I folded the page carefully and pressed it against my palm. My throat tightened. I felt like a piece of my heart had cracked open and filled with something, heavy and warm at the same time. I looked up at Margaret. My voice was barely audible. What happens now? She said the next decision was mine. They would explain the rest, but only if I wanted to hear it. My mom had left more than a letter. She had left instructions, requests, and a file that bore my name. I nodded once because even though my pulse was racing and my emotions were tangled, I needed to know. I needed to hear everything she had been unable to say. Margaret closed the folder gently. Then let us begin. Margaret folded her hands on the table and looked at me with that steady gaze that reminded me of my mom. For a moment, nobody spoke. I could feel the letter in my hand, the thin paper warming against my skin like a small heartbeat. She started with the foundation itself. She explained that decades ago, my great-grandfather, Charles Everett Hale, had created it after a health scare. He had been successful in real estate and medical properties, but he wanted something that would outlast him, something that did more than pay dividends to a small group of relatives. The foundation funded scholarships, community clinics, and research grants. It grew slowly, quietly, over time. Margaret said my mom had been very close to him when she was young. She cared less about cocktail parties and more about the kids who showed up at the clinics in worn-out shoes. She fought for funding that did not impress donors, things like mental health programs and transportation vouchers. Charles loved her, but he was old and stubborn, and they argued a lot. Then she left. Margaret said that when my mom walked away from the family, she did it clean. She signed documents that released any claim on direct family assets. No houses, no stock, no slice of the family trust. She did not want it, but she refused to sign anything that erased her future kids. That line, Margaret said, was where she drew the boundary. That was how my name ended up in their files, even though I had never stepped foot in this building before. I asked about my birth certificate, still staring at that blank space where Dad's name should have been. Margaret nodded and said my mom had come to see her once, all those years ago, before I was born, with tired eyes and a hand on her belly. She told Margaret she was having a baby. She was not married. The father was unreliable. She was leaving town and did not plan to come back. I asked what my mom said about my name. Margaret smiled faintly. She said Caroline insisted that her baby would carry the Hale name. She knew the relationship with my dad was unsteady. She was not sure how long he would stay, or how he would treat us. She wanted at least one thing that tied me to something solid. She had filled out the hospital paperwork herself. When Michael Porter came into the picture later, the birth certificate was already filed. He never pushed to amend it legally. My throat tightened. Somehow that simple explanation felt like the most loving thing I had heard in a long time. My mom had not been careless. She had been deliberate. Jonathan spoke next. He slid another set of pages toward me, thicker this time. He said they were account summaries tied to an internal program my mom set up, in her early 30s. Back when she still did small administrative jobs and could barely afford her own rent, she had quietly contributed a little each month to a side fund at the city foundation. Over time, with investment growth and some matching contributions my great-grandfather had approved without telling the rest of the family, the balance had grown, not into millions, but enough that it mattered. Jonathan pointed to the number at the bottom. A little over $230,000 in a mixed account, some designated for education or training, some unrestricted, all held under the name of a minor child to be identified and contacted only upon her mom's death. Me. For a second, I just stared at the number. Then I looked up sharply. You were telling me my mom, who worked double shifts and bought her clothes at discount racks and worried every month about the electric bill, had money tucked away like this? Jonathan nodded. He said she never touched it. Once she left Sacramento, she refused any checks from the main family trusts. The only thing she had agreed to was a small monthly routing through the foundation's accounts that went into this fund. She did not want to owe anyone. She just wanted to know she had built something for me that did not depend on a man who might disappoint her. I thought about evenings when she made soup and pretended she just liked it. Thin about times she told me no on a school trip and blamed the timing, not the cost. She could have made her own life easier. Instead, she had been building this quiet safety net for mine. I asked what I was supposed to do with this information. My voice came out more brittle than I meant it to. Margaret said there were 3 parts to what they were offering. The life insurance funds that had never reached me, the personal account my mom had built, and a non-voting observer seat attached to certain board meetings if I wanted, to learn how the foundation worked. She said the money was mine by right, legally, morally, emotionally. My mom had made sure of that. The only decision was how involved I wanted to be going forward. I reminded her I was not a lawyer, not a finance expert, not anyone special. I was just a scheduler in a crowded medical office who spent her days arguing, on hold with insurance companies and refilling the printer tray. Margaret held my gaze. She said that was exactly why my mom trusted me more than most of their relatives. I knew what real people went through. I knew what it felt like to worry about bills. I knew what it meant to watch someone in pain and have to say there was nothing else the plan would cover. That kind of experience mattered more inside these walls than any polished networking skill. One of the trustees, a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a slightly crooked tie, spoke up. He said they were not asking me to run anything. I could choose a simple path. I could take the life insurance in full, roll the other funds into a personal account in my name, accept a one-time orientation about the foundation's work, and walk away. The door would remain open, but no one would chase me. Or, if I wanted, I could commit to a more structured path, training sessions over the next year, meetings where I could sit in as an observer, learning how grants were evaluated, where the money came from, and how decisions impacted communities. He said the choice was mine. The word choice felt heavy tonight. So many of my choices over the years had not been real at all. They had been framed inside my dad's moods and my limited bank account. Suddenly there was space. Space I did not know what to do with. I asked about my dad. I wanted to know if they planned to report him. If someone in this room was going to pick up the phone and turn Michael Porter into a case file for mail fraud, Jonathan said, in careful, measured words, that opening someone else's certified mail, attempting to redirect funds, and failing to inform the rightful beneficiary were all serious matters. The insurance company had already flagged the irregularities. They had not yet decided how far to escalate. The foundation had some influence there. He said they were prepared to support whatever course I wanted. They could request that the carrier pursue formal action. They could encourage a softer path that focused on making sure my dad never touched the money and signed acknowledgement documents instead. Or they could stand back and let me handle my own family the way I saw fit. Margaret added that revenge often felt satisfying in the moment, but complicated later. Protection came first. Integrity came second. Public punishment, if it came, should always be a last step, not a starting point. I sat there and thought about my dad's face at the dining table, the way he laughed when he called me broke, the way he said my kids should have been grateful for leftovers, even though I did not have kids. Just potential he constantly mocked. I thought about him telling me to sign papers blind, about the way he said he kept the lights on, as if my mom had never contributed anything. I also thought about the letter my mom had written, the way she had described me in a few simple lines. Stubborn, soft-hearted, stronger than I believed. She had not described me as cruel. I told them I was not ready to decide about my dad that night. I needed time. I needed to sit with the knowledge that he had tried to take from me and that my mom had been protecting me long before that. Jonathan said that was reasonable. Margaret nodded and said they would hold off on any formal requests to them. Carrier until I had a chance to rest and think. The funds could be secured in the meantime. Nothing would leave those accounts without my written consent now that they had seen me in person and verified my identity. I asked what came next, tonight, in practical terms. Margaret said they would prepare temporary documents to transfer control of, the insurance claim to me. No signatures tonight, only explanations. After the holiday, they would schedule a private session with a financial advisor who specialized in clients with backgrounds like mine, people who were the first in their branch of the family to suddenly manage real money. She said they would also show me more of my mom's file if I wished. Photos from her 20s, notes she had written on early grant proposals, a list of projects she had supported during the few years she had remained involved. I felt a dull, steady exhaustion settle into my bones. I told them I wanted to see those things, but maybe not tonight. My heart already felt raw from the letter. I was not sure how much more I could take before I fell apart in front of everyone. Margaret closed the folder in front of her. The sound was small and final. Jonathan stood slowly, as if signaling that the formal part of the evening was finished. He said the cars were waiting to take me home, or to a hotel, if I did not feel ready to go back to Stockton. He said they could arrange for someone from the foundation to accompany me I was worried about how my dad might react. The thought of walking back into that house alone made my stomach twist. The thought of staying in a hotel in a city where my mom had once walked these streets made my chest ache in a different way. I slipped my mom's letter into my coat pocket. I rested my hand over it for a second, pressing it close. Then I stood, legs unsteady but working, and followed Jonathan to the door, knowing that the next time I saw my dad, I would not be the same person who had driven up his driveway a few hours earlier. I walked beside Jonathan in the quiet hallway, the soft hum of the lights following us as we made our way back toward the Elevator. My legs felt heavy, like each step carried the weight of everything I had just learned. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside and leaned lightly against the wall while Jonathan pressed the button for the ground floor. Neither of us spoke on the ride down. I could feel the letter inside my coat pocket, the thin folded paper warming beneath my hand like a small reminder that my mom had somehow planned for a future where she was no longer here to guide me. When the doors slid open, the lobby was almost empty. The woman at the front desk gave a gentle nod as we passed, as if she knew that whatever I had faced upstairs had changed me in ways I had not yet understood. Outside, the row of black SUVs waited in the cool air, their headlights off, their engines silent. The night in Sacramento felt different from the night I had left behind in Stockton. Cleaner, quieter, more patient. I was not sure if the change was in the city or in me. Jonathan asked if I wanted to go home or to a hotel. The question sat heavily between us. Home meant the porterhouse, the tension, the accusations. The unopened mail is sitting somewhere in a drawer, the half-eaten Christmas dinner on the table. The phone in Emily's hand captured my humiliation for her followers. I heard myself ask if they could take me back to Stockton, but drop me a block away. I said I needed to go inside on my own. I needed to decide what I wanted to say and what I needed to keep to myself. Jonathan studied me for a moment and nodded. He said he would instruct the driver. The ride back felt longer than the ride there. I watched the freeway blur past, each mile carrying me closer to the house I had never really thought of as mine. I wondered what my dad was doing, whether he had started pacing, whether Linda had poured herself another glass of wine and started whispering about ungrateful children, whether Emily had posted another video about the poor side of the family. I pressed my fingertips against my temple and tried to quiet the noise in my mind. When the SUV pulled off the freeway, I straightened in my seat. The driver asked softly if this was close enough. I nodded and said I could walk the rest of the way. Jonathan stepped out with me and closed the door behind him. He adjusted his coat and looked at me with that calm steadiness he had carried all night. He said he would check in with me in the morning. He said the foundation could arrange security if I felt unsafe. I told him that would not be necessary, though the truth was I did not know how my dad would react. I had never seen him caught so off guard. I had never seen fear mix with his anger the way it had when he realized that men on the porch had not come for him. Jonathan placed a business card in my hand, just in case. Then he gave a small nod, stepped back into the SUV, and the convoy pulled away quietly, leaving me alone on the sidewalk, with the cold air brushing against my cheeks. The walk to the house felt longer than usual. The neighborhood was still. The holiday lights glowed faintly on porches and eaves. A few windows flickered with the blue light of television screens. I could feel my pulse in my throat as I approached the driveway. The house was dark, except for one window in the living room. Shadows moved behind the curtains. I stood outside for a moment, listening. No shouting, no footsteps, just a faint murmur of voices, low and tense. I thought about turning around. I thought about walking back to the SUV route and calling Jonathan to pick me up. But running had never changed anything before. It had only delayed the same hurt waiting for me later. So I walked up the steps and opened the front door quietly. The living room lights were on. My dad sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, rubbing his forehead hard with both hands. Linda stood near the window with her arms crossed, her face tight and pale. Emily was not filming for once. She was curled in an armchair, her phone in her lap, her expression wary. All three of them looked at me the moment I stepped inside. My dad stood too quickly, like someone had yanked him up by invisible strings. His voice shook. "Veronica, what have you done?" I closed the door behind me. The quiet click sounded louder than it should have. I told him I had gone to hear the truth. He paced toward me, hands clenched and unclenched. "You embarrassed this family. You let strangers drag you out of here. You left us sitting in this house wondering if you had any idea what you were walking into." I kept my voice steady. I said I had more ideas than he thought. I told him the foundation had shown me copies of the letters addressed to me. 3 certified envelopes delivered to this address, all signed for by him. His face went still, the anger tightening into something harder. He said I had no right to accuse him. He said those envelopes were confusing, full of legal terms, and he thought it was junk mail or something that needed sorting. He said if I had just trusted him, he could have handled it. I took a few steps into the room. I did not raise my voice. I asked him why he had called the insurance company and asked how to redirect the funds. I asked him why he had told me nothing. I asked him why he had shoved papers at me tonight, demanding I sign things in the middle of our Christmas dinner. Linda stepped forward. Her voice was sharp and strained. She said we were trying to protect you. She said everything tonight had been blown out of proportion. She said the men in suits had intimidated us and that the whole situation felt like a trap. I pressed my fingers against my palm. I told her the foundation had explained everything. My mom's policy, my mom's file, my name on documents that had sat untouched for years, my mom's letter, the one she had written for me and left for the foundation to hold. A flicker of something crossed Linda's face. Panic. Guilt. Something she tried to hide with a quick swallow. My dad shook his head violently. He said those people were lying. He said they wanted something from me. He said I was being manipulated. He said my mom had walked away from that family for a reason, and that I was digging up things better left buried. My jaw tightened. He had never spoken about my mom with this much heat. Not like this. I asked him what he thought the foundation wanted from me. I asked him why they would show up with documents, archived files, and a letter in my mom's handwriting if they had any plan to deceive me. He did not answer. He looked at the floor, then at the wall. Anywhere but at me. Emily shifted in her chair. For the first time, her voice sounded small. She asked if I had been hurt, if they had forced me to go. The question surprised me, but I told her no. I told her I had been treated with more respect tonight than I had been in this house in a long time. My dad snapped that I was ungrateful, that I did not understand how much he had done for me, that I had been nothing but a burden since the day my mom died. That all he had asked tonight was a little cooperation, and instead I had turned it into a spectacle. I stepped closer to him, my voice very quiet. I said that my mom had protected me from the moment I was born, that she had filled out my birth certificate alone, that she had chosen the Hale name for a reason, that she had left a letter for me because she did not trust the people in this house to act in my best interest. He froze when I said that, completely frozen. His mouth opened, then closed again, like someone had cut the strings on a puppet. I could feel something shifting then. Not in him, but in me. A slow, steady realization that the ground beneath us had changed. That whatever control he thought he had held over me all these years had slipped. I told him I was not staying. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. His eyes widened at that. And I saw real fear flicker there, the fear of losing the one person he's still expected to bend. I turned toward the hallway to get my coat. The house felt smaller behind me, as if its walls had begun to shrink the moment I stepped inside. I reached the hallway doorway when I heard him gasp my name, sharp and desperate, but I did not stop walking. I moved toward my room with my mom's letter still pressed against my heart, knowing that nothing in this house would ever look the same again. I walked down the hallway with the weight of my mom's letter still pressed against my chest. My room was dim, lit only by a small lamp I had left on earlier. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. The walls felt familiar but wrong, like the room belonged to someone who still believed this house was safe. I opened the closet and pulled out the small suitcase I kept tucked behind. Old shoes. My hands moved automatically. Folding clothes, grabbing my toiletries, slipping my work badge into the front pocket. I could hear muffled voices in the living room, sharp and frantic. My dad's low rumble, Linda's clipped whispers, Emily's soft attempts to calm them. I did not stop packing. Each shirt, each pair of jeans, each small item I placed inside felt like a step out of the world I had carried on my back for too long. When I zipped the suitcase, the sound seemed to cut through the house. I picked it up and walked toward the door. My steps felt steady, slow, sure. In the hallway, I paused, listening again. The voices had quieted, replaced by a tense, thick silence. I stepped into the living room. They all looked up at once. My dad stood first. His hair was messy from running his hands through it, his face flushed and tight. "Where are you going?" I told him the truth. I said I was leaving. Tonight. I said I would return for the rest of my things later, and only when he was not here. He stared at the suitcase like it was a betrayal. "You think you can walk out and just throw this family away?" I held my ground. I said families protect each other. They do not hide letters. They do not open other people's mail. They do not call their own daughter a burden. They do not lie to her about money that belonged to her. They do not mock her for being broke when they are the ones who kept things from her. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jump. He took a step toward me, not close enough to touch me, but close enough to try to make me feel small. He said I was being dramatic, that I was letting strangers manipulate me, that everything tonight could be resolved if I just calmed down and signed the papers he had tried to give me earlier. Linda inhaled sharply, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "Michael, stop!" But he ignored her. He told me I owed him, that he had housed me, fed me, raised me, that my mom had left him with bills and responsibilities and a child he never asked for. My grip tightened on the suitcase handle. I told him he had not raised me. I said my mom had done that. Every night shift, every early morning, every scraped knee and homework assignment. She had carried me, and he had stepped in only when it made him look good or helped him avoid feeling alone. He looked stunned for a moment. Then his face twisted. "If your mom was so perfect, why did she leave you all that nonsense with the Hale name? Why did she not want you to have my name? Why did she try to hide from her own family?" I felt something sharp rise inside me then, a clarity that cut through the fog of his anger. I told him she had kept the Hale name because she had known he would try to take things that did not belong to him, because she had known he would try to control anything he could get his hands on. Because she had wanted to protect at least one part of me from him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes darted from me to Linda, then to Emily, as if searching for someone who would defend him, someone who would join his outrage. But no one spoke. Emily stood slowly. Her eyes were damp, but steady. She walked to me and placed her hand lightly on my arm. "Do you want me to help you carry this to your car?" The relief that washed over me was small but real. I nodded. She reached for the suitcase and lifted the other side. Together, we walked toward the front door. My dad lunged forward a step. "Veronica, get back here. I am not finished talking to you." I stopped in the doorway and looked at him. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as a figure with power, but as a man who had spent years taking advantage of someone too tired to fight back. I told him there was nothing left to say tonight. He shouted that I was making a mistake, that the foundation did not care about me. When they were done using me, I would come crawling back. I turned the doorknob. I told him quietly that the only mistake was believing he could keep me small forever. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside. It felt sharp and clean, like a first breath after being underwater too long. Emily helped carry the suitcase to my car. She set it down gently beside the trunk and turned to me. Her expression caught between worry and apology. She said she was sorry. Sorry for the things she had said. Sorry for the jokes she should not have made. Sorry for not seeing sooner how much I had been carrying alone. I told her she was young and influenced by the atmosphere in that house. She nodded and wiped her cheek. She asked if I would be safe. I told her yes. She asked if she could call me tomorrow. I nodded again. She hugged me quickly, her hands shaking, then walked back toward the house. I opened the trunk, placed the suitcase inside, and closed it gently. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. The house stood in front of me, quiet and tense, the porch light casting a pale glow across the yard. I could see my dad through the window, pacing like a caged animal, his silhouette sharp against the living room light. I started the car. The engine hummed softly. For a long second, I did not move. I just watched the house, the place that had held me in place for so many years, a place that had shrunk around me. Then I pulled out of the driveway, the tires rolling slowly over the cold pavement. At the end of the street, I stopped at the stop sign and looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The house was still there, but it feels smaller now, like it was finally losing its power. I turned onto the main road, letting the city lights stretch out in front of me, unsure where I would sleep that night, but certain that whatever was waiting for me could not be worse than what I had left behind. The road ahead felt open in a way it never had before. The road ahead felt open in a way it never had before. I drove without turning on the radio, just letting the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires on the highway keep me company. Stockton blurred behind me, then stretched out beside me, then finally settled somewhere in the rearview mirror where it belonged. I did not have a plan beyond getting away from that house for the night. Every cheap motel sign I passed looked tempting, in a sad kind of way. I pulled into the parking lot of a place near the freeway, stared at the peeling paint and the row of doors that all looked the same, and something in me said no. I was done choosing the hardest possible version of everything. I sat there in the dark for a minute, then reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Jonathan's card. I studied his name, the Hale Foundation logo printed crisp and clean, the number at the bottom. My thumb hovered over the call button on my phone. He had called if I felt unsafe. I did not feel unsafe exactly, just untethered. But I pressed the number anyway. He answered on the second ring, his voice as calm as it had been all night. When I told him I had left my dad's house and was sitting in a motel parking lot with a suitcase in my trunk, he did not make a sound of judgment. He just said he could have a room arranged at a business hotel near downtown in 30 minutes, that it was safer and cleaner, and that the foundation would cover it for as long as I needed a place to land. The idea that someone could offer help without strings attached made my throat tighten. I said yes, then followed the navigation app as it guided me back toward the center of town. The lobby of the hotel smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. The desk clerk handed me a key card with a professional smile that did not carry any curiosity about why a woman with red eyes and a wrinkled blouse was checking in late on Christmas night. When I opened the door to the room, the first thing I saw was a neatly made bed with white sheets and a window that looked out over the quiet city. I set my suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time that day, I let myself cry. Not the tight, angry tears I had swallowed at my dad's table, but the deep kind that comes when you realize a chapter of your life is really, truly done. Sometime in the middle of the night, I fell asleep with my mom's letter still against my chest. The next morning, the hotel room phone rang just after 8. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered the night before. The drive, the parking lot, the new room. Jonathan's voice came through the line, warm but businesslike. He asked if I had slept at all. I told him some. He said Margaret wanted to schedule a video call later that afternoon to go over next steps, and that a financial advisor the foundation worked with had blocked out time for me the following day. By lunchtime, I had coffee in my hand and my laptop open, the hotel Wi-Fi humming quietly. On the video call, Margaret did not look surprised to see the faint puffiness around my eyes. She just nodded like it was expected and normal. She walked me through simple things first. The process of filing the life insurance claim correctly. The paperwork to put the funds into an account in my name only. The documentation my dad would be required to sign to acknowledge he had no right to those funds. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. What did I want to do about his behavior? The insurance company had already documented the irregularities. If I wanted to, I could support a formal complaint that might leave him facing fraud charges. I sat with that for a long moment. Part of me flashed back to him laughing about my brokenness while cutting into his perfectly glazed ham. Part of me remembered all the little ways he had made sure I stayed small. Another part thought about Emily standing in the driveway with tears in her eyes, asking if I would be safe. I told Margaret I did not want him in prison. I did not want his life destroyed. I wanted him confronted with the truth. I wanted him blocked from ever doing something like this again. I wanted a paper trail that reminded him, and anyone who looked at it, exactly who had been in the wrong. She nodded. She said they could request that the carrier flag his name so any future attempts to interfere with a beneficiary would be scrutinized closely. They could require him to sign a notarized statement admitting he had opened my mail and attempted to redirect the funds. If he refused, the carrier would push harder. If he complied, the matter would likely end quietly, but permanently. That felt right. Firm, not cruel. Boundaries, not blood. Over the next several weeks, life reshaped itself around me. I extended my stay at the hotel then. with help from the foundation's relocation service, leased a small one-bedroom apartment in Sacramento not far from the river. I gave my notice at the clinic in Stockton and transferred to a similar job at a community health center in town that happened to be one of the Hale Foundation's longtime grant partners. The first time I walked into that clinic and saw the plaque on the wall, Hale Community Health, supported by the Hale Foundation, something in my chest went warm and aching at the same time. My mom had believed in places like this. In the tiny exam rooms where people with nowhere else to go sat on crackling paper and tried to explain their pain in under 10 minutes before their public insurance ran out of patients. On weekends, I sat in on training sessions at the foundation. Jonathan introduced me to the grants team, the legal counsel, the finance staff who moved numbers on screens that turned into very real medicine and bus passes and school supplies. There were binders with my mom's notes on pilot projects she had fought for years ago. Reading her scribbles in the margins felt like sitting beside her at a kitchen table I had never known. Every step I took into that world made the porterhouse feel farther away. My dad called a few times that first month. I let most of the calls go to voicemail. The messages came in waves. Anger, guilt, self-pity. His voice jumped between telling me I had broken his heart and accusing me of being ungrateful, between blaming the foundation and blaming my mom, between insisting he had meant well and pretending he had done nothing wrong. In the end, what shut him up was not me, it was paperwork. He received a packet from Great Harbor Life that itemized the intercepted mail, summarized his phone call asking about redirecting funds, and laid out the legal consequences if he attempted anything like that again. It included the statement they expected him to sign to acknowledge his actions and give up any claim to the policy. He forwarded a blurry picture of the first page to me with a single text, asking if I was happy now. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back one sentence. I am relieved that the truth is recorded. He signed. I saw the confirmation through the foundation's liaison. After that, the calls slowed. The messages got shorter. Eventually, they stopped. Emily and I found a different rhythm. She came up to Sacramento one weekend under the excuse of touring a college campus. We had lunch near the river. And for the first time, we talked about things that had nothing to do with our dad. Her communications degree, my new job, the way she had quietly archived some of her old videos that made fun of our family. She told me people in Stockton still talked about Christmas night, how the neighbors saw the SUVs lined up outside the Porter house, how someone in the family had let slip that the cars had come for me, not my dad, how his stories about being the one holding everyone up were starting to crack. It was a small kind of karma, not dramatic, not televised, but real. Reputation shrinking where he had once puffed it up. Truth leaking into the spaces where lies had lived comfortably for years. Spring has come. The clinics we funded started sending in new grant proposals. High school seniors submitted scholarship essays. I sat in conference rooms and listened to staff talk about outcomes and budgets and how to stretch limited money to cover endless needs. Sometimes I spoke up. Sometimes I stayed quiet and just watched. On the anniversary of my mom's passing, I drove out to the cemetery alone. The sky was overcast, the air cool and still. I brought a simple bouquet of white flowers and one small piece of paper I had, printed the night before. I knelt beside her headstone and brushed away the leaves that had gathered around the base. I told her about Sacramento, about Margaret and Jonathan, about the little apartment near the river, and the health center with her name on the plaque. I told her about the account she had built and how it was supporting me while I learned to carry more responsibility than I had ever imagined. Then I unfolded the piece of paper and smoothed it against the stone. It was the draft of a new scholarship the foundation board had just approved. In principle, the Caroline Hale Transition Grant, a small yearly award for women leaving controlling relationships who need it, help covering deposits, education, or childcare while they started over. It was not a huge program. It would not fix the whole world, but it was something solid and real with her name on it. I told her I hoped she would like it. As I sat there, the wind picked up a little, rustling the branches overhead. I thought about the girl who had walked into my dad's house on Christmas night, wearing a simple black dress and cheap shoes, bracing for another round of mockery and silence. I thought about the woman who had climbed into that SUV an hour later with no idea what waited at the other end. They were the same person, and not the same at all. In the months that followed, people sometimes asked me if I ever got my revenge, if I had ruined my dad financially, if I had cut him off publicly, if I had gone on social media to tell my side of the story. The truth is, I did not need to. My revenge was walking into rooms where my last name opened doors he could not even find. My revenge was signing documents with my full name, Veronica Caroline Hale, and knowing exactly who had made sure that name survived. My revenge was pouring money he tried to steal into clinics and scholarships, and housing deposits for women who felt as small and trapped as my mom once had. My revenge was a life built on truth instead of fear. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt like the smallest person at your own table, I hope you hear this part clearly. You are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with basic respect. And sometimes, the loudest answer you can give to people who underestimate you is not a speech. It is a boundary and a new address. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this. Silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from. And if this story kept you company today, let me know by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who might need the reminder that walking away can be the first step toward finally coming home to yourself.